First is the continued hearing in case C92012, 6th at Campbell, PAD or PAD. Mr. Beal, do you have any updates on approvals and protests to report?
No, not at this time. We had a lot of, I sent you all the letters that people have sent in, and you have a letter from the Rincon Heights neighborhood, but most of everything was, the same people, have already added to that. And
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. Yes, and I've received those letters and read all of them. And I went back and looked over my own personal notes from the prior hearings. So we're ready to have further testimony in this case and then to move along to the other cases. So would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to speak?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. One question I have to start, John. So you said you've read all the new letters that you received from John. Did you get, I had 4 of them come in the last 24 hours. Does that include the new letter from Lisa Thompson, Ted Hinderacher, Mackey?
Yes.
Bill Mackey.
Yes, and for the and for the record, that's Mr. Scott Cummings asking me. Yes, Scott, I've looked at all of those, and we're good. And I've also obviously looked at the red line of the PAD document, which I asked you to provide by June 10th, and I appreciate your doing so.
Okay, and so then you also received the final, obviously, too. Then we're able to.
Yes. Okay. The clean copy as well.
I would, if this is similar to what the format from the last meeting, you had indicated you don't really want to go over things that have already been covered, correct?
Yes, I mean, I want people to tell me anything they want to tell me. I have reviewed all the materials, so I am up to speed. So you don't need to say things just for my benefit. But sure, Scott, if you have particular remarks you want to make, that's fine. You don't need to replow all the old ground. I have a few questions of you and your group, so we can proceed any way you would like. The floor is yours right now.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to open up by just kind of going back and looking where we've come from and where we're going from the very first meetings, and in the fact that we've made some great strides, I think, in resolving some disagreements on points. We haven't, neither side has gotten everything they wanted, or everyone is I think been open, and I think the playing field is much better from where we started. I think one of the biggest things that really struck me was I hope that you feel that one of the concerns, the previous concerns about the PAD document being very nebulous. We came back between narrative and between drawings. I think that we did a great job, actually, the team did, of really kind of having this project gel, so to speak. And one of the things I'd like, and I think John said that he did convey to you, is that I have reached out to a fellow named Roy Dean, who owns Arid State Enterprises, who was the mover of the houses on the Sunshine Mile. And so I've opened up a dialogue about, and hopefully he'll be able to come down to really evaluate the houses that the historic, that they've asked for some historic evaluations on, and the possibility of if any of them can be moved, or what would be the process. So that is something I think is very positive from where we started. I think the project, is taking into consideration the fact that we do have a historic neighborhood to the south. I think that between the placement and the different heights, the uses of the buildings and the heights of the buildings on the site have demonstrated that we have taken into consideration the fact that, for instance, the 25-foot heights on parcel B and C, that the neighbors to the south of that we don't have a structure that is any more imposing on them than that. From where we started, the height on parcel A being reduced almost 33%, I think speaks volumes. I think we've been, from the very beginning, I think, once again, we've listened to the neighborhood. And more importantly, and I think this is one thing that has been kept out of the equation, and I feel it's been remiss, is that I don't feel that there was a question of lack of engagement. And I will say I was remiss at the very beginning with the neighborhood association that, I should have been more engaging, but I don't want it to be forgotten that more than a year and a half ago, I started talking to all my immediate neighbors, people that were live, either owner occupants or people that own houses on the alley. And also I started a rapport with people on 7th Street. So I think there's more to the equation, once again, than just the neighborhood association. There's neighbors that are immediately affected that aren't active in the association. So I think that's imperative to remember. And at this point, I mean, I don't know if there's, you said you have specific questions. Before we go any farther and delve in, I don't know, Miguel, is there anything that you'd like to add before we start?
No, I think if there's any questions, or I can answer them by the neighborhood association or by John, but I think we're pretty close to what was originally presented at the last zoning meeting, and then Cindy put it all together with both packages very well and sent it out so the Rincon Heights Neighborhood Association could have plenty of time to review it. But if questions come up, I will certainly give answers for why those decisions were made.
Well then, Scott, with your yielding the floor, I would there were two parts to Mr. Marsh's letter or email back to you that I wanted to go over one part of very quickly. There were some clarifications that were being offered by Mr. Marsh to the PAD document, and I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page, or if we're not, that's fine too, on what I would call just like clarifications. The first is whether the bike share station would be paid for by the developer. So Scott, what say you on that piece?
That's fine.
Yes, I think all these may be, but I didn't want to make any assumptions on your part. The second is they point out, Mr. Marsh's email or letter points out that although the hotel use is intended to be limited to building A or parcel A, that buildings or parcels B and C still have commercial use allowed, and I think they just want it to be tied down that the intent is that hotel will be permitted on parcel A, but only on parcel A. You're good with that also?
Yes, John, absolutely. If there is a hotel use, it would be strictly on parcel A.
Got it. Then they also, they note that your drawing shows the one driveway that will be permitted between, help me out here, Martin and someplace, right? But the text of the PAD doesn't call that out in writing specifically. I'm assuming, but you can tell me I'm wrong, that your intent is for the text of the PAD document to correspond to the diagram, and there will just be the one driveway. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then they also point out that the appendices E and D and E, I guess it would be D as in dog and E as in elephant, are just attached to the PAD document, but not referenced in the text of the PAD document. I'm assuming that it would be agreeable with you to add one sentence identifying what they are so that someone reading the document can understand what the appendices may have before they get back to the back. Is that okay with you too?
Yes.
Okay, then apparently the lettering on the appendices may not match up, maybe a little out of order. I'm assuming that's also just a clerical issue and that we have no issue there. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, if you don't mind, I've got two more that maybe a little more substantive. It seems like there may be some disagreement on wording. I think the PAD document talks about decoupling parking fees from tenant leases, and they're more comfortable with the word unbundling the parking fees from the tenant leases. As a personal matter, I don't really think I understand that there's a difference between the two of you, but I'd rather have you tell me that you are in agreement with the concept that the parking fees would be unbundled from leases. You've used the word decoupled, which I understand to mean the same thing, but am I missing something there, Scott? Is there some difference in language that you think is important on that?
No, the nomenclature, the decoupling was in the in one of the Rincon Heights first requirements or their first letter. That's where that came from.
Yeah, sure. But
I agree with you, John, that they
right.
they mean the same.
Okay, good. Then the last part on the clarifications piece of this is, I think your PAD document as revised, and thank you, Ms. Hogan, for turning that around so nicely. The PAD document talks about 90% of the shade structures on the parking lot roof will have solar panels deployed on them, I guess, and they're asking about 90% of the garage deck having solar panels. And let me just lay out for you my very simplistic way of thinking. I assume there will be driving area on the top deck that may not be covered by a shade structure. Is that right?
Correct. The panels.
And so there may be a difference between the total square feet of the shade structure, of the parking deck top, which may be different from the square footage of the shade structures on the parking deck top, right?
Correct.
Is that right? But your intent is to provide 90% of the shade structure roofs, if you will, by square feet, I assume. 90% of that will be solar deployed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, then one more piece. The updated traffic analysis that I think you agree with, the suggestion has been made that that be provided prior to this going to mayor and council for mayor and council consideration. Are you agreeable with that?
Yes.
Okay, so by my record keeping then, if you will, I think there are 4 issues and any other issues people want to talk about, but the 4 issues from the writings that I've seen exchanged, the 4 issues that are still on for decision along with the PAD approval itself is the height on parcel A is 1, whether there would be maximum 3 bedrooms on any residential units is 2, no balconies, rooftop pools, or other open air amenities that would project sound into the surrounding area. I'll call that 3. And the issue of the Class 6 liquor license as an allowed use. And I would couple that, I wouldn't bundle it, but I would couple that with square footage of any bar establishment in the development. Because I think what your proposed PAD is asking for, maybe you've put the number 12,000 on it. Do I have that right, or was it 14?
Yeah, we reduced it down from the land use code has it at 18,000 as a definition of we reduced it from 18,000 down to 12,000.
Well, okay.
Yes.
I got it. So just from your side, and I'll certainly open it up when you and I are done talking and you've told me everything you want to tell me. Do you think that there are other issues besides those 4, I've called them, that are still in play that have been raised by other interested parties, including the neighborhood association, that are still in play, or is that pretty much it? And I don't use the word pretty much it to demean it or to say it's not significant. I'm just trying to get my arms around how many issues we still have open. Are there other ones, Scott, from your point of view, or is that it?
No, I think you hit it on the head.
Okay. Well,
there is also the agreement, providing a neighborhood agreement that would be outside the PAD, but I don't think that's an issue.
Right, so that is, thank you, and just for the record, please identify yourself.
I apologize. Miguel Portavia, Forge Architecture, live in Sam Hughes neighborhood.
Yes, I knew your voice, but the record doesn't. So,
Sorry, John.
no, that's quite all right. So, Scott, if you or your team want to say anything else, please go ahead, and I will give you the opportunity to speak again after we've heard from others. But if there's anything else you'd like to say now, please go right ahead.
Well, I think it would be appropriate at this time to talk about those 4 remaining issues and why we haven't fully resolved. Do you not agree? And
Yeah,
and what I'd like to say is, and I think I made it pretty clear, and I in maybe a couple of meetings ago about the Class 6 liquor license, you know, and it comes from personal experience. I've been blessed to be able to be part of the Sam Hughes neighborhood for 38 years as a business operator, and I'm hoping that I continue to stay there, God willing that my leases keep getting renewed. But you know, in a situation where I had recently where I had to go to a number 6 license because of an audit by the liquor department, and that's really the crux of anything going forward. I mean, I hope to be an operator of some establishment in this new project, and also talking to other operators. I mean, right now, it's imperative to have a number 6. If you're going to go out and invest millions of dollars into tenant improvements, and let's say you sell 38% food instead of 40, that's a big cloud hanging above you. And then also the idea that you know, we may, if I was an operator, I may want to use the word bundle, possibly put 1 or 2 or maybe 3 other uses under one license if they were the same operator. So I mean, I think there's, you know, and I understand, you know, when, you know, through meeting, I think one of the great meetings I had when I met with Lee personally on one-on-one, you know, I think we were able to kind of go back and really kind of to exchange ideas better. And I understand that, you know, they keep bringing up, well, we don't want another hi-fi here, hi-fi. You know, that not stopping a hi-fi there is not going to be contingent upon whether you have a 6 or not. The idea that a raucous, you know, big nightclub is going to be located in that facility, it's not going to happen. You know, that's why the elected officials, you have due process. If a liquor license or any liquor license, whether it be hopefully the specialty market that we're trying to lure into the corner, I mean, every liquor license has to be given public notice. The neighborhood is not only, you know, they are noticed directly. It's not just that they drive by and see a sign up there. So, you know, nothing can be approved without public input. And I think that, you know, there's safeguards to protect against any potential problems coming from a liquor license.
Okay.
The no more than 3 bedrooms, I have no problem with that. I mean, that's fine. I've agreed to that. The height is still a sticking point. And, you know, I really want this project to be something that is not only iconic, but something that the neighborhood feels that it's benefiting them. And in order to offer those benefits, for instance, whether it be a specialty market or whether it be a coffee house, we're closing streets, we're trying to stop traffic from ingress into the neighborhood. These are all things that, you know, in the cost of new construction, we need to go to 95 feet. And I don't, if I thought that the extra 20 feet from, you know, and the 90 feet was brought up in a meeting that I had with Lee, and you know, subsequently it's now gone from 65 to 75, which, you know, I appreciate. But if I felt, or if we felt that the difference between 75 and 95 feet created a great heartburn for the neighborhood, or was a negative impact, I would be more cognizant. I just don't think that is something that's going to harm the neighborhood, the extra 20 feet.
Okay, thank you for that. You didn't touch on the balconies, rooftop.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. And on the balconies,
but what, in my response, what I had told them is that we would, if for instance, on parcel A, if it was a hotel use, we would not allow balconies facing to the south. And most likely on any hotel use, we probably wouldn't have balconies anywhere, but I just, to be cognizant of noise transmission, definitely to the south. But I think that right now, we've thrown out group dwelling, we've thrown out multiple, more than 3-bedroom units. We're trying to do everything we can. We've all agreed that there's going to be some students living in a project like this. We're not building it as a student housing project. We're hoping to get a nice mix and to keep it from being just a transitory type runner from year to year. You have to have some amenities, and the balconies, I think, are a must to get a tenant that's going to rent and want to stay there on a longer term basis. And we've agreed to the no pool on the very top of it. On the rooftop, no rooftop pools. But I wouldn't want to eliminate any other rooftop amenities. And I think that everything would be done or designed so that nothing would be projected south into the neighborhood. I think that really answers any concerns or concerns the neighbors should have.
Thank you. So I just want to follow up on the liquor license piece, because I think you have information and knowledge that not everyone else present in this hearing has. And you also understand the neighborhood's concern is that they don't want a 12,000 square foot student bar or bar, a single, right, one 12,000 foot bar they think will have a negative impact on the area and the neighborhood. And I have to say, stating it that way, that has some logic to it.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is, well, I don't want to give up the Class 6, right? I still want to try for the Class 6 because there are other safeguards called the State Liquor Control Board, who's going to have a public hearing. And you also spoke to the fact that there may be multiple users within the proposed new development that might be under one umbrella license. But as the business person who knows the liquor laws better than most of us here, what can you offer, if anything, by way of pragmatic conditions that would prevent there being a 12,000 foot bar, right, on the premises? Is there another way that you can still have your Class 6, but not have the neighborhood have to deal with the effects? I mean, I'm assuming a 12,000 square foot bar is a pretty big bar. I don't go to a lot of bars. I've been to Bob Dobbs, for example. How big is Bob Dobbs?
Approximately a couple thousand feet without the patios, and then we expanded. Let's say 3,000, 3,500.
So
I think I waited on you, John, by the way.
You did what?
I think I waited on you and your family in there once.
Well, you probably have, and I only eat half the Connie burger because I'm trying to lose weight. But putting that to the side right now, what can you propose, if anything? And this is not let's make a deal. I'm just asking you to give some statements to the neighborhood and the other interested parties that would say, well, I hear you guys. I hear you don't want a 12,000 square foot bar. What can you do that would be different than one big bar, Scott? That you could.
And I absolutely understand where they're coming from and where you're coming from. And it's not the intent to build one big 12,000 square foot bar. One thing I'd like to point out is that this is a project that's going to have a lot of components, and one of them being multi-use is that you're going to have people living above it. This is not intended to be a nightclub. It's not, and I'm trying to think what we can, what verbiage, I'd be willing to put a condition in there that, if it was a single use or a single theme,
What do you think, Miguel? Like,
Yeah, you can put a condition in there that basically says that no single use or theme brand would be over a certain square footage, but
Right.
that you could have you can have one tenant with multiple concepts.
right, that's what I was
Yeah.
alluding to
Yeah,
earlier.
and I think you can write that in there and to limit the square footage.
Okay. Well,
And-
that's
and-
what I was thinking. So what's your square footage on that, you think?
I would say, and, I would be willing to go one user not to exceed 8,000 feet. And the reason I say that, I don't think 8,000 feet would ever be used all at one time, but we're in an activity center. And what I'm thinking about is if there was outside seating on a football game, and you had patios out around the facility, I think I would be more than happy to live with that.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for that. And let's turn now. I had some notes from folks who wanted to speak, and then I will open it up after that so everyone gets a chance to be heard. Melody Peters, Ms. Peters, would you like to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And please, even though I've said your name, Melody Peters, just start with your name and address for the record, and then go right ahead, please.
Okay, Melody Peters at 1416 East 10th Street,
Thank you.
which is in Rincon Heights. I have objections to the project, which are, some of them are aesthetic and also concerns about nuisance, and others are related to something more grave in the way of public safety and health concerns. As far as aesthetics goes, I am concerned about the height. I feel that the project is massively out of scale with our historic houses that make up the majority of the neighborhood structures, and would even dwarf the existing apartment buildings. While it's true that that viewed from the south side of 7th Street, the UA parking structure would hide the taller portion of the project, the structure would still be visible from much of the rest of the neighborhood and would block the views of the mountains that we so value. Nuisance concerns are twofold. One is access, and the other is noise. So access to the neighborhood is already difficult in the northeast quadrant of our neighborhood. Over the past, 10, 15 years, we've had one street after another close, which has made it difficult to get out of the neighborhood and get back into the neighborhood. So we have very limited egress and ingress to the neighborhood at the moment. I am concerned that traffic will back up even more than it is already on 6th Street, especially at certain times of the day, making things even more difficult. In terms of noise, residents partying on balconies and possible rooftop activities would almost surely broadcast noise over a significant part of our neighborhood and also Sam Hughes. We've heard that there will be possible rooftop activities, but we don't know what those are. It sounds like the pool is out, but I'm more concerned about partying, especially partying with a lot of liquor, and that tends to make for lots and lots of noise. If you work at home, loud music can prevent you from doing your work. Any loud noise can keep you awake at night. And my husband and I can attest to this because we've had in the past next door neighbors who have been partying and binge drinking 4 nights a week for an entire year, leaving us in a constant state of exhaustion throughout the whole year. The noise was more than just a nuisance. It affected our health and work performance, and I would not wish this kind of agony on residents living near the proposed project. So I'm very concerned about balconies and rooftops, and even though Scott has said that he that noise from the roof would be blocked, I'm concerned possibly they could block it from Rincon Heights, but there's still Sam Hughes across the street to be concerned about. So it's not just our neighborhood, but also Sam Hughes' neighbors. The public health and safety concerns that I have, a development that combines dense housing. This is a lot of housing for our neighborhood. It's a huge increase. A possible hotel and up to 12,000 square feet of bar. Really, all on one property really worries me. I don't know if there's a precedent for such a combination of uses in Tucson. Possibly downtown there is. I don't know how that's worked out, if it has, if that exists already. Located so close to football and basketball venues, this is a great location to make lots of money selling alcohol to Wildcat fans. But I wonder at what cost to the city and adjacent neighborhoods, and to the city as a whole. A large bar, and perhaps this won't happen, but a large bar on that corner would be a place where game attendees could go to liquor up before games and celebrate or commiserate on game wins or losses with consumption of even more alcohol after the game. While a hotel at that corner might offer drunk patrons the option to stay overnight rather than endanger the public by driving home under the influence, a majority of those imbibing will be driving home, thus risking the lives of those of us who need to use the streets to return home on game nights. Who will pay for the increased need for DUI enforcement? And certainly no monetary compensation adequately pays for someone severely injured or killed by a drunk driver. Apart from game nights, this development appears to be geared towards making a profit off the UA undergraduate drinking culture. What is the purpose of, and what will result from locating a bar within a large-scale housing project? Assuming that most of the residents will be undergraduate students, is it wise to give them such easy access to alcohol? Won't partying in the bar spill over into the housing units, encouraging an epidemic of underage drinking? And what role would the hotel rooms play in this development, which could turn out to be party central? How safe are balconies crowded with carousing students? I understand balconies in this climate are a wonderful asset, and I do wish that people have that ability to have that sort of indoor-outdoor life, and the balconies would definitely be part of that. But experience has shown that these balconies are sites of partying and kids throwing beer bottles down the mosque over that area that's on the northwest side of campus. I mean, there has been some real abuse of balconies. So I think this is a legitimate concern, and I understand the need or the desire for balconies, but we've had some pretty bad experience with that. College drinking culture is a serious nationwide public health concern, and is especially prevalent in schools like the U of A, with strong sports programs, fraternities, and sororities. Binge drinking by college students negatively impacts scholastic performance. Other serious impacts include alcohol poisoning, suicide. Most violent assaults committed by college students are alcohol related, including sexual assault. Or there are 100,000 sexual assaults that are alcohol implicated in this nation every year. So this is a grave concern. Long-term effects of binge drinking can include lasting harm to developing brains and lifelong alcohol addiction. Pima County's alcohol addiction rate is higher than the national average, and it's something that we all pay for one way or another. Like others in this neighborhood, I had hoped that for development on this corner, that would be an asset to the neighborhood, the larger U of A community, and the city as a whole. The plans that I see are only causing me concern at this point.
John,
Thank you, Ms. Peters.
John,
I'm sorry?
John Cummings.
Yes.
Can I ask one favor? I've got a fellow calling in from Mexico that I think is on the line. Can we ask that he be able to speak if he can hear us?
Sure. What's his interest in
Lon
it?
Wirtz, Lon Wirtz, can you hear us? Lon? Okay, how about, can I ask that Ted Hinderbacher go next for time constraints, and then after that, I'm open to whoever wants to go.
Sure, go ahead. Ted, go right ahead. Start with your name and address, please.
Yeah, Ted Hinderbacher, and I'm a resident of the San Hughes area. And Mr. Reno, it's nice to see you after all these years.
Nice to see you also.
It's been a while.
You don't look different at all, so go right ahead and keep that in mind.
So I'm a resident of the San Hughes area. I live approximately 2.5 blocks from this project. And I was involved with the San Hughes project 10, 15 years ago, San Hughes Place. And there were similar concerns expressed about that never really came to fruition. As a member of the San Hughes Neighborhood Association, as a resident, I appreciated the ability to walk to the restaurants. And this project will have restaurants, a market. It's got all sorts of amenities that I think that are going to enhance the value of all the properties and make things more livable and walkable in our neighborhood. And also, it's people are concerned about the noise and the students, but you're living right next to the university, so it's hard to complain about the university being in your backyard if that's where you choose to live. And most of us live there because we like the university, we like the activity, we like the energy. So I think Scott's done a good job presenting this to the neighborhood. The plans look like they're realistic and they would benefit the university and the neighborhood. And I wholeheartedly support this project.
Thank you, Mr. Hinderbacher. So the next person on my list is Colby Henley. Mr. Henley?
Hello.
You're muted, Mr. Henley.
Sorry, I hit it twice.
That's okay.
My name is Colby Henley. I live at 1140 East 10th Street here in Tucson, which is in the Rincon Heights neighborhood. So I just want to speak a little bit about kind of being reminded that where we're starting from with the existing zoning, that much of this is residential, that Mr. Cummings is asking be upzoned to hotels, bars, retail, which we have always stated we agree that that corner is appropriate for some uses like that. And so, but at the same time, the city and the neighborhoods, we don't have the obligation to agree to that increased amount of zoning in order just so that the owner of those parcels can make money on his investment. And instead, the onus is on the applicant really to show how his development is not going to adversely affect the community and ideally even provide some benefit. Having said that, we appreciate the changes that Mr. Cummings has offered now on the proposed pad. Unfortunately, it seems that he's continually waited until it appears that his application is about to be rejected before he offers any flexibility or creative ideas. And the 8,000 square foot class 6 idea that was bounced around just earlier in this meeting is one such example. We had emails back and forth and never made any ground. And then here we are at the meeting and he's able to throw out a creative solution. Again, the burden is on the applicant to show the benefit from the upzoning of his properties. And at this point, I just don't think that he's risen to that ideal. And therefore, I'm just speaking out in opposition to the pad as it currently stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. Mr. Craig, William Craig.
How do I get hooked up here? How do
We can hear you.
Oh, you can. Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. How do I mute myself afterwards? I didn't realize I was not muted. I'm on a phone.
Okay. Just go ahead and tell me what you have to say, and we can sort out the rest of it later.
Okie dokie. So I'm calling to say that at this point, I think Scott has made some minor changes as far as the desires of the neighborhood and the needs of our neighborhood. But as far as the big things, the heights and the number 6 alcohol license, those are two things that I just can't see any way that we can let that go. We've gone up on height. We don't mind 75 feet. Personally, for myself, I think it should be lower, but the group has decided that's where they can feel more comfortable. But the number 6 license really seems to me like it's just asking too much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Craig.
How do I mute myself?
Yeah, I think you pushed some buttons on your phone, maybe. Like star or
I'm
something
sorry.
or other. Not sure.
Okay. Anybody know?
It didn't have any detrimental effect before, so we're good to just go ahead. Don't worry about it. Thea Erickson, Ms. Erickson, are you present? Well, we'll come back to Ms. Erickson. Timothy
Hi,
Kinney?
actually, I didn't ask to speak tonight.
Okay, I thought I saw an email, but
I did send an email, but it wasn't a request. It was like, I just wanted to make sure you knew where I stood on this to make,
Okay.
for the record, but I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
I saw and I understand, and we'll move on, but thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Mr. Kinney?
Yes, good evening. My name is Tim Kinney. My address is 4957 East Fort Lowell Road. I'm an attorney representing the Rincon Heights Neighborhood Association. I'll be brief, as you've already heard from and will hear from other members of the neighborhood about its unaddressed concerns and some of its frustrations with this process from the beginning. So I'd like to describe a 30,000-foot perspective, which I think is important to remember in considering the neighborhood's current position. So the applicant began this process in August of 2019 with a pre-application meeting with the city, and I'm sure work began internally even earlier than that. So that was nearly 2 years ago. The applicant then held its required neighborhood meeting in late October 2020. Between August 2019 and October 2020, the neighborhood only heard about this rezoning twice, both times briefly and without details or any discussion. After the October neighborhood meeting, the neighborhood provided its December 8th letter, which you're familiar with. It listed its concerns and expressed a desire to meet and work through those concerns with the applicant. The neighborhood fully expected, as is customary with any rezoning application, that the applicant would want to work with them until their concerns were addressed and would attempt to convince the neighborhood to support its application. As the neighborhood association most impacted by this potential development, the association assumed their input would be needed. Instead, their letter and their concerns were ignored at the time. The applicant felt that its one required neighborhood meeting and staff's review of the PAD document was sufficient outreach and that the neighborhood's concerns were not important. It was clear at this point that the applicant was unfamiliar with the political aspects of the rezoning, but it's not enough to simply meet code requirements, as we know. Broader community and neighborhood support is also needed. This mindset became something of a theme in our interactions over the next several months. The neighborhood's concerns weren't treated seriously until 2 or 3 months ago. Discussions were clearly being held solely because they were encouraged by you, and the neighborhood did most of the work, honestly, trying to get a PAD they could support into where we are tonight. A huge amount of the disagreements between the applicant and the neighborhood has been the apparent disconnect between what the applicant intends and what the document clearly states. And we've noted this issue several times. The neighborhood became exasperated and are still exasperated trying to explain this disconnect and trying to get the applicant to suggest actions they could take to resolve these issues. We saw an example of this tonight regarding the large bar issue. So in short, the neighborhood has done most of the applicant's job for them, and the applicant has done the bare minimum in response. Then faced, as Colby mentioned earlier, faced with the likely denial of the application, they made a number of changes, which are appreciated, while still failing to address some of the neighborhood's primary concerns. These recent changes in the past month were not made as a result of discussion and agreement, but rather in the interest of self-preservation and keeping the application alive. So while these changes to the PAD were necessary, and if this gets approved, they'll no doubt make this a better project, they're not enough, and they don't address all of the primary concerns the neighborhood has been clear about since December, if not October of last year. So this, in addition to how the neighborhood has been treated during this process, gives the neighborhood no incentive or reason to support this application. Lee Marsh, the president of the neighborhood, will, I believe, speak sometime this evening, and he'll give a more official response from the neighborhood. But we ask that you recommend denial for these reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kinney. Stacy Plassman. Ms. Plassman?
Yes, hi. Am I okay? Can you hear?
We can start with your
Okay,
name and address, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. My name is Stacy Plassman. I live at 1803 East 9th Street. I have lived in the neighborhood for 33 years. I own a small apartment court in this neighborhood as well. As a matter of fact, it's on 10th Street, just south of the area in question for this proposal. And I do have some serious concerns about the proposal as currently written, and only as it's currently written can we even talk about this. We can't, as we know from other neighborhoods have found out, everything, you can only look at what's written down, what's there. You know, you can't say, oh, well, we'll just assume that it will be different than what's written. No, we have to go with what's written. So as written in this proposal, there is potential for the development described in the proposal that would be detrimental to the neighborhood, and I believe to the character of the university as well. I'll make the couple of points that others have made. The tower is just too tall in this current proposal. I kind of thought that plenty of profit and creativity could have been done with the zoning as it was. I mean, I own an apartment court. I always find it funny when people say how big things need to be to make a profit. Well, I'm not losing money on my apartment complex, and it's not very big. And so I don't understand this, that has to be big, because that's not been my experience for myself and my apartment development. So I don't think I don't think that how tall the tower needed to be any bigger than what the current zoning would even say. But you know, kind of opening my mind to it, I could see that well, all right, even up to 75 feet, I guess I could accept that. But anything over than that, seriously, it's just too tall. And then the proposal does not explicitly exclude a Class 6 liquor license, so that definitely leaves the possibility for a big bar to be located there. And that is something that neither the neighborhood nor the university needs at this location. The university does not need a big bar right there. You know, that's not very academic kind of a thing. So it's not something that the university needs. That's not a university need. And because you can say, oh, well, there could be other ways for the Class 6 to be used. It still leaves open the possibility for a big bar. So that really needs to be excluded, you know, any chance for that at all, because it all has to be as written. So I urge you to deny this current proposal as it describes development that is not appropriate for this location. The developers can submit a different proposal in the future. Perhaps the next proposal will describe appropriate development for this area, but the current proposal as written does not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plassman. Mr. Homan, Mark Homan.
Thank you. I have just a couple things to say. First of all, let's not be fooled. It's not how far Mr. Cummings has come down from the sky. It's how far this will come up from the ground that matters. And 90 feet, 95 feet is extremely outside of the current zoning. It is almost four times the current zoning. Oh, by the way, I live at 1619 East 8th Street, where I and my family have lived for 45 years. And zoning is supposed to guide development. It's supposed to protect us. We know what we're buying into when we come into a neighborhood like this. To have, and I've used the term egregious exception before, such an egregious exception of current zoning is making a travesty of the zoning process itself. So I think that the height issue is something that is a critical matter. And I would hope that you understand that had Mr. Cummings said that he was going to make a 180-foot structure, now he's come down to 90 foot, he can claim that he's reduced it by 50%. Again, it's not how far it comes from the sky, it's how far it comes up from the ground that matters. The second thing is that, yes, there have been some promises and some good suggestions Mr. Cummings has made here tonight, some assurances that bad things won't happen. As a couple of the folks have said, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And so if there's not going to be any kind of a raucous bar, if there's no sound coming into the neighborhoods, either to Sam Hughes or into Rincon Heights, that has to be clearly written down. A guarantee of that is meaningless unless it's in writing. The third thing I'd like to point out is that outrageous, one of the speakers said that those of us who live near the university should expect all this outrageous behavior from students. That's not true at all. That's not what we bought into. I understand there are football games occasionally. I understand that there are going to be events at the university. I understand that. We had to work with the university to keep them from getting the patrons to their games from leaving tons, literally, of garbage in our neighborhoods. But we didn't expect, we don't buy into that being a consequence of our living here. And to say that we should be willing to accept outrageous noise from students, is that we should reasonably expect that. That's an outrageous assumption. We should not. And anything that contributes to that or holds the possibility of contributing to that should be prevented from occurring in the first place. And finally, I want to point out that this is a residential neighborhood. So if we're making comparisons to downtown, we're making comparisons to, other kinds of settings, those things are irrelevant. We have to understand that this is being imposed upon a residential neighborhood, one where we all agree that this is where we're going to live with 25-foot zoning there, and to make any kind of change to that is so extraordinarily a departure is unacceptable, and I'm going to ask you to please deny this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Homan. Mr. Marsh, do you want to be heard?
Yes, thank you. Hello, my name is Lee Marsh, M-A-R-S-H. I'm currently the president of the Rincon Heights Neighborhood Association. Thank you again for allowing me to speak and present this evening. Of course, as you know, after the last hearing, we were given an opportunity to review the final version or a final sort of version of the document, which included a number of important changes. And this was a really critical step for the neighborhood to be able to comment and deliberate on a concrete proposal, because the previous iterations of the document were speculative and nebulous. Unfortunately, because the applicant very intentionally left us out of the process of deciding what changes should be made and what is most appropriate for the neighborhood, we posit that the pad in its current state does not adequately address our concerns and is inappropriate in scale and scope for the area. We got together as a neighborhood and we decided, we had a conversation about how we could make this to work for us. The conversation was not how can we scuttle this project or what is it that we hate about this project. It was how can we make this project work. So we've tried to be very open-minded, and we've been very consistent about what we want. We have suggested 75 feet of the apex, which is consistent with other large developments in the neighborhood, what the applicant has asked for in the past, and frankly is generous considering the forthcoming Sunshine Mile overlay within our neighborhood requires land value returns such as affordable housing to reach such heights. What makes this project better that we should treat it differently? And we'd prefer not to abandon all hopes of seeing some affordable housing come out of this project, but it seems incredibly unlikely, and the zoning hearing is not really the arena for that discussion. We also have no desire to have a noisy bar in or around our neighborhood. Mr. Cummings already runs a number of bars that run the gamut between pretty innocuous to a public hazard, and we're not really willing to roll the dice to find out which this will be. And I just want to be clear that we're not saying no to something more low-key, like a restaurant or a brewery or a wine and beer place even. We are saying no very specifically to a bar or a nightclub. And, we talk about 18,000 square feet versus 12,000 square feet. Now we're suggesting like no square feet for Class 6 license. It's largely because I think the most mitigating thing you could do is just try to accomplish the things that Scott Cummings is trying to do with a different kind of license. I mean, you look at Hi-Fi as a bad example, and that has apartments above it, and that did get past the liquor board. The other things that we have asked for, the only things that were not present in our December 8th letter, are really intended to allay our continued concerns that what we are going to get is a student housing project, whether that be group dwelling in the legal sense or otherwise. The applicant has said many times that he doesn't want to build or run an obnoxious bar or student housing, but how can we trust his word? He has a long chronicled history of violating zoning law at those very sites. And throughout this process, he has spent his time and energy trying to work around us, undermine us, and misrepresent me. He has done everything in his power to avoid addressing our concerns. What would make things any different now or in the future? So, after reviewing the pad and sort of putting all this stuff together, we forwarded that information to the applicant in an email, and he said no. And the pad is kind of in a state now of what you see is what you get, and Cummings was very clear in the message that he sent to us before the last meeting that he had no interest in discussing our concerns further. We've been pretty absolute in what we've asked for at this point, and everyone was pretty clear about where they stood in the issues, so it didn't really make sense for us to meet again. So no, unfortunately, we are not supportive of this pad in its current state. And just on a personal note, if it wasn't for the judicious decisions that have come out of these hearings, we would have had zero say in this project at all, and I will forever be grateful for that. But having said that, I am also just so tired of this. I'm sure everyone is. I'm sure you are too. Scott has really made this as agonizing as possible for everyone involved, even himself. I've only been the president of the neighborhood for 3 months, and almost all of my time and energy has been put into this. I have other ideas of what I want to get people excited about: public art, tree planting, historic preservation, but I've had to put all that on hold because Scott Cummings wants another shot at getting his pad right. And thinking about the next several months trying to hammer out a private agreement, checking his homework, or even fighting this at mayor and council, I literally just want to cry because I know it's going to be just as excruciating and difficult as it's been. So, I guess we could have just let this go, but, I think it would have been really extremely bad for the whole area if we hadn't involved ourselves. So that's all I have to say, and I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for participating very much. Would anyone else in the audience like to speak? Go ahead, Ms. or Maura. Thank you. Please go right ahead. Start with your name and address.
Thank you. My name is Moira Poggi. I live at 1735 East 8th Street, and it's just a few blocks from the proposed pad. I'm currently calling in from Vienna, Virginia. So if you have any connectivity issues, I apologize for that in advance. Rincon Heights has been my home for the last 2 years, and I intend to live in Rincon Heights for many more years. The neighbors and the neighborhood in Rincon Heights have been the most caring and thoughtful and wonderful neighbors to have nearby me, and I'm so grateful for all of them. I think Lee's words about the neighborhood and his efforts in the neighborhood are really indicative of how much each of us care about the character of our neighborhood and how we want to see it developed in the future. One of the things that I really value about Tucson and Rincon Heights is our diversity in our neighborhood and how we can honor that diversity by building a development which recognizes an age diversity, a gender diversity, and a racial diversity that exists in Tucson. And I don't see the thought that's put into this pad reflecting that diversity. I think a lot of us can appreciate how we've seen that developed in various spaces around Tucson, and I would be overjoyed to see that in a space in our own neighborhood. And I've been gravely disappointed in the process that's been put forth for this pad to recognize that diversity. Whether it's regards to affordable housing, whether it's regards to a gathering space, and whether it's regarded in building a greater community space for us and our future generations. So I would urge the opposition to the pad, and we have been very forthcoming in our opposition and the things that we believe would make this a great space for ourselves and our future generations. So I'm sorry to say that I oppose this project, but thank you for your consideration, and please pass the torch to the next person.
Thank you, Ms. Posey. Mr. Chiappetta, Dave Chiappetta? I guess not. Laura Tabili? Unmute, please.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, I thought there was someone in front of me, but okay. Thank you for hearing me. Laura Tabili, 116 North Mountain Avenue. I've lived in the neighborhood. I've lost count, but I've owned my home since 1999, and I think I moved into the neighborhood about 10 years before that. And I rented from Stacy Plasman, and her rent is very reasonable, by the way, and she is still making money. So, and she's also a great landlady. So, so I've lived here a long time. Actually, I wrote to you my concerns, and then Melody actually voiced many of them. So I won't repeat too many of those, at least not at length. But I have many objections to this, and I share my neighbors' concerns. But the giant bar with the Class 6 liquor license is really, really a concern to me. And whether it's 8,000 square feet or 12,000 square feet, if you read my letter, you maybe remember that my house, 10 of my house would fit into a 12,000 square foot bar. And I know that there are bars on 4th Avenue that are smaller than my house, like Bison Witches, right? And they serve food. So this, well, we want a Class 6 license, but we will serve food. That's not what the letter of the pad says, right? It does not say that they will serve food. So we, when we find ourselves in a situation where it's a giant bar that is generating all the problems, not just for the neighborhood, but for the city, police calls, drunk driving, etc. And we say, well, and there was a meeting back in 2021, and, Scott said he was going to do something else, but that's not what the pad says. So that's a concern to me. I also actually share Melody's concern about closing Martin Avenue off, which would have to happen with the number of people and the amount of parking that development is projected to have, because having lived in the neighborhood for a while, just as Melody said, one by one, the northbound streets that would get you out onto 6th have been closed off, so that right now there is no northbound access to 6th Street between Highland and Martin. Right? And Highland's a very congested intersection with a lot of pedestrians. There have been really bad car on pedestrian accidents at that intersection. I try not to use it. And then going west from there, Mountain's also blocked off. Then you get to Santa Rita. So if Martin is blocked off, basically there's no way to get onto 6th Street to get out of the neighborhood making a right turn, unless you basically go north, south, east, and west. So that's a concern to me too. So just such a large bar without any provision for food, whereas a brew pub or something like that would place an emphasis more of an emphasis on food. And that's what the Time Market does. That's even Gentle Ben serves food, right? Most of the college bars serve food. And I have to say, I don't see how, not only is this bad for the neighborhood, I really don't see how it's, why the university isn't weighing in on this, because having a bar of this size just adjacent to campus is not a good thing for our student body. And I'm going to put on my professor hat for a minute, right? We have lots of students, and in fact, lots of other people who struggle with addiction, and to have this type of an establishment right on the border of campus, I just think is really ill-judged. Secondly, is the height, right? And again, I wrote in my letter, but I'll repeat here which is that the university, of course, is a state institution and they trump local zoning. So they can build a monstrous parking deck that's way higher than the existing zoning, and there isn't anything the city of Tucson can do to stop them. But that should not be the new standard, right? That shouldn't be the standard against which other developments that are not state institutions and therefore can't trump city zoning. That's not the standard we should be aspiring to. We should be, and I agree with Stacy, let's look at the existing zoning. Why can't this business person make a go of it within the existing zoning? I have to say that I live between 9th and 10th Street, and development of this magnitude is going to be visible everywhere in the neighborhood. At the moment, I can look out my kitchen window and I can see the Santa Rita parking deck very clearly from my kitchen window, and it's 5 or 6 blocks away. So to say, well, only people 2 or 3 blocks from this development are going to be affected by it is just not realistic. And of course, I hope I'm not betraying any confidences, but some neighbors call the existing parking deck the St. Mary because it's lit up all night, right? And it's huge. You can see it from a great distance. Finally, I believe that the pretext for a PAD, for a zoning change, has to be that it benefits the city in some way. It shouldn't just benefit the property owner, and it shouldn't just benefit the neighborhood. It should really benefit the city. That's why the city has zoning. And it's just really hard to see how the city would benefit from this. Planning and Zoning Department, PDSD, I've seen them over the years approve many an inappropriate development because they thought that it would raise tax revenue, right? And this probably would. But there are all these offsetting liabilities, like extra police calls because of people driving under the influence, or having fights outside the bar or inside the bar, traffic congestion. What are we going to do about that intersection, which is already really hazardous when dozens, if not hundreds more cars are flowing through it every day? And so those kinds of things can end up being a liability for the city. So I don't really see that this project benefits, not only does it not benefit the neighborhood, I don't see how it benefits the university, and I don't see how it benefits the city of Tucson. And finally, I don't actually think it should be up to the residents of a particular neighborhood to protect Central Tucson from bad development. That's what the zoning is for. So thank you very much for hearing me, and please advise the council not to. Oh, one more thing to say, well, we'll have a Class 6 license now, but then there'll be the planning, then there'll be the liquor board. That's just kicking the can down the road. That means we all have to go to the liquor board, right, and make these same arguments. And Lee is entitled to be really tired, but so the rest of us are too. Thank you very much, Mr. Urino, for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Tabili. Stacia Reeves. Ms. Reeves.
Thank you. My name is Stacia Reeves, and I live at 224 North Highland Avenue, and this is my husband, Jay Layden, lives at 224 North Highland. I have a question, and I hope that's okay that I can ask. When they say 95 feet in a zoning, is that at the bottom of the floor, or is that the maximum of the height of the floor? I'm not clear on that.
My understanding would be that's the max height, exterior height.
Okay, great, thank you. And I had another question about driveways and ingress and egresses. I'm new to this, so is a driveway different than that?
Well, you got me on that one.
Okay.
So ingress and egress means to come in and go out, right? The
Right.
driveway is a particular way of coming in and going out of a property. But go right ahead and tell us what you have on your mind, and we'll try to sort through it.
Okay, because I'm noticing that on page 19, there are 4 driveways east of Warren, in addition to the Warren ingress and egress. And then it was said on page 31, and these are the pictures, and I'll get to your question at the very beginning of the meeting in just a second. On page 31, it says there are 3 between Warren and Campbell. And I guess my question is, at the beginning, it was said that the narrative would be what it is, and that there would only be 1 ingress and egress between Warren and Campbell. Well, in the narrative, it has 3. So I guess I'm confused, and I really am, my concern in living in Rincon Heights neighborhood on Highland is not only our property value. I'm a public school teacher, and the property value is very important to my retirement and my standard of living, as well as my husband, who's a self-employed individual. It's a very big concern to me, and I really am concerned about the density in this neighborhood area. And with the ingresses and egresses, I'm concerned we already are at E for the transportation traffic survey in this area, and at D for like 75% of the access according to the tables. And that's not even considering this development of an activity center. And I do see the 223 hotel rooms and the 340 apartments, not including the capacity that would happen with the retail. Oh, I'm sorry, Miguel, I was referring to the table that you had said, oh gosh, darn it, I didn't write down the page. Sorry, I just took those numbers from the pad proposal. But in lieu of time, what I'm saying is if there are additional ingresses and egresses on that street that's already almost to F, then we're going to have some huge congestion, which will then negatively impact our neighborhood due to cut-throughs. Highland already has excessive cut-throughs, which my house is on, which negatively impacts our property value. The other thing that I am really, really worried about, because I witness accidents and close calls all the time, is the flow of foot traffic, scooter traffic, bicycle traffic, and vehicular traffic. And I understand that there is, Warren would be an ingress and egress that would be a roundabout for people to be able to drop off. However, there is not a plan that is specified and detailed of how that would accommodate the foot traffic in addition to that. My example of just being a citizen in this town is there's a shared bike kiosk, very important, but the way that it's located at Tucson Boulevard and 6th Street, it's dangerously close to the street. Therefore, there's a visible block when a person is going southbound on Tucson in a vehicle and turning right going west onto Tucson. You cannot see because of the advertisement and the tower of the shared bicycle kiosk. Therefore, the person cannot turn right until the light has changed, unless they're risking that move. Therefore, traffic is blocked until that light has changed. And my concern with the pad is just saying that the shared bicycle kiosk will be somewhere on the premise. Well, I feel as a concerned citizen of Tucson and a neighborhood property owner that this needs to be specified with the zoning. This needs to be included in safe routes of where the pedestrians will cross, where the bicycle kiosks will be, where the traffic will be entering and exiting the retail space and the arbor space and the, what's the word I'm thinking of, parking spaces. So the other concern that I have, in addition to that, is the idea of our height. Because of the density that an activity center is going to have, I feel because this is not Broadway and Campbell, a 95-foot building development might be appropriate for that location. Or let's say River in Campbell, where it doesn't have the intensity of the activity that's already going on. Hey, I'm a U of A alum, so is my family. We are so involved and have season tickets to the games. We love it. I mean, I was even one of the college kids on 7th Street who we had come back for halftime parties at my house during, you know, the football games. So I'm not opposed to enjoying the U of A activities, but safety has to be a huge impact on this. And I feel as though the height of 95 is going to bring a greater density than what this area can handle. 65 feet feels like it is the mindful and responsible zoning for this area, because it's reducing the amount of density in that area. And the last thing I want to say is, yes, there have been big changes, and I look forward to increasing more specifics of this pad to make it safe so we can really enjoy this and really not have something that's called, you know, Suicide 6th Street, like it was, you know, the suicide streets when we had the lanes going down, you know, during the driveways. I don't want it to be a negative impact on our community. So I look forward to continuing to working to have something that's sustainable for our community, that we can all agree that will be helpful for our municipality. Thanks.
Thank you.
John?
Yes.
Yeah, Dave is, he is on and he's trying to get on, but I think you have to give him a few minutes by the time he mutes. Dave Chiappetta.
Okay.
If you all like, I mean, he's ready.
Would you like to be heard?
Unmuted. He's got his hand up.
Mr. Chiappetta, the floor is yours. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chiappetta, I can see you, and I can see you have your microphone unmuted, so go right ahead. Okay, so I think Mr. Chiappetta might be having some technical issues. If you can join us, go right ahead and talk, Mr. Chiappetta. Otherwise, I'm just going to move on to the next speaker, and we'll come back to you. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard?
Yes, please.
Go right ahead.
My name is Marie Yonkers, and I've lived at 2043 East 3rd Street for 40 years. The neighborhoods have acted in good faith to find common ground. Unfortunately, Mr. Cummings has not gone far enough to protect these residential neighborhoods. For that reason, I hope that you will vote against going forward with the pad. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for participating. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard?
I think Cindy had a question.
No.
I don't know. Cindy?
Yeah, I'm Cindy Hogan. I'm with CDG Architects, and I was trying to follow the three entrance reasoning. A search of the pad, I couldn't find that. We've always had three ingress egress from 6th Street, but not three between Martin and Campbell, which was what I thought I heard. So, and there's also an exhibit that shows the number of ingress egress currently into the property, which is obviously more than we ended up with in the pad design. So if there's still questions about that, I can get to the bottom of it if need be.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Hogan. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard?
John, this is Miguel Portavia from Force Architecture, San Hughes. I did want to talk about some of the items that were brought up really quickly.
Go right ahead.
So I want to talk about the height a little bit. That was brought up by Melody, Colby, Lee, and Laura. So as we know, we have a 25-foot height directly behind the 7th Street houses that steps up to 50 at the corner. And as we know, it's about 51 plus across the street, directly across the street from the Sam Hughes place. And then it steps up to 70, which I don't think those heights have been in contention. And then we step up to pad A, which is the one that, and it did initiate between discussions back and forth with the neighborhood. And so I think that's a little unfair to say that. And the reason Scott did want to meet with the neighborhood was so that he could explain his position. The existing parking structure, which is, you know, over 2.5 times the footprint of what pad A would be, is at a height of 65 to 85 feet. So that parking structure from every angle except actually the houses directly on the alley at 7th Street would the parking structure would completely block out the building, as you can see in the site section that we have provided. Because the parking structure, again, goes from a 65-foot height to an 85-foot height. Now, the 95-foot height only puts roughly 1.5 floors below a zero plane at 65 to 85 feet, which means you would have to be that high for them to be blocking the mountain. So I just want to be clear with that, and that is why the applicant, Mr. Cummings, did want to meet with the neighborhood, which was turned down because they didn't feel like there was any need to meet there. So there has been a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth on the height. I'd like to directly address Mr. Kinney's comments that there has been no negotiation. And of course, we didn't come in until March, but I find that to be unfair. As a matter of fact, based on the 27-point letter, I think that Lee Marsh is directly referring to, there have been a lot of items that have been addressed, and they've been directly addressed, not because of self-preservation, because this is what we would consider progress based on all those meetings that started in March. And there's been quite a few changes, and we all know what those are. So I think that was completely, a personal attack, but I don't want to talk about the negatives. I want to talk about the positives. I want to refer a little bit to Colby's remarks on the existing zoning being, 4 times the size. So as we all know that existing zoning reaches pretty far back, and we all know that that was way before the U of A and many of the buildings that have been built on both sides of the street. And that 6th Street is no longer a residential street. It's quite obviously become quite a large mix of mostly rental and then all business or university. And as we know, we're building B, and what we're building C is there's already commercial use of restaurants and a little bit of office, but mostly restaurants. So number 2, I would also like to talk about the fact that it was unfair to say, again, yes, there was an initial of 18,000, of which the applicant came down to 12,000. So there's been a lot of discussion of, trying to meet those points. Now, when the neighborhood says there's been no discussion, sometimes I think that's unfair because it means that they just haven't met exactly what the neighborhood wants those points to be. And again, that's why the applicant asked for another meeting to address some of these and why he was trying to explain his position on those. When Lee just directly says that they were deliberately left out of the process for change, I can only speak as to when we've come in. Changes were actually in particularly coming out of those meetings that we've had with the neighborhood, from March all the way to today. And then I did want to address also another question on that came from Colby, and it has a lot to do with the fact of the square footage again, is when you look at North Restaurant, which is a project that we were personally involved with and did, North is a good example. And yes, it is food and alcohol. And I think Scott's going to talk to that here at the end. But that one is well over 8,000 square foot and is a mix of both restaurant and alcohol. And I just wanted to give you that as an example of one project. And is there anything else I've left out that you wanted me to talk about? I think that kind of, again, going back to Lee Marsh's comments about group dwelling, that was something that came directly out of those and was actually completely offered up to the applicant to drop from the, based on the negotiations that we've had. And it wasn't in the beginning when the negotiations started, when we came on board, could be less in the group dwelling to under 50% or under 30, and there was 100% drop. And again, that's only one example of many things that have come out of the neighborhood meetings, which again, I think is unfair to characterize as self-preservation. Just the opposite. Again, these are progress. What you do, you go back and forth, and why the applicant was asking for one more meeting to explain these last two of the 4 points. I'm going to leave that off.
Yeah,
thank you for letting me speak.
Dave came down from his house because he'd like to speak, so we do have him if you don't mind.
Go right ahead, Dave. Mr. Chiappetta?
Hi, good. My name is David Chiappetta. I live at 1809 East 7th Street, one of the bordering properties of the project in question here. I've lived there for 22, 23 years. And I would like to say, to address what was just saying a second ago, that I'd like to thank Scott for all the input that he's given me over the years about this project specifically over the last few months. He's always been totally open and honest with me about what he's wanted to do there, and I applaud that. So I don't know what the rest of the neighborhood association, he's always been open and willingness to talk about anything. I will say that as far as the number 6 license, I am in favor of that. I've worked for 30 years in the restaurant business here in Tucson, and I think it would be putting a stranglehold on somebody trying to open a business there unfairly to try to run it under something else if it didn't need to be. It should be an option for them to have a number 6 license. As far as the balconies, I know a lot of you address your concerns about all the beautiful views. Well, I live right there. I have no views of the mountains. It'd be great if somebody built a structure there that was higher than the parking garage, even on the south side, to have balconies that you could take advantage of the views. Very beautiful town. It'd be great to see it. And as far as the height, I just addressed that. I think it should be higher than the 95 foot that's proposed. I'd be willing to go up to the 140 feet that you already had in the last pad proposal. I think that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chiappetta. Scott, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Yes. One thing, I mean, I really, I'm perplexed about the whole big bar, one thing I would add as a condition is that whatever liquor license goes in, if it's a 6, that it has to have a food component. I'm not trying to say me or somebody else should have a 8,000 square foot establishment that is just run as a big bar, nightclub. So, I mean, once again, a food component would be no problem to put in as a restriction. I look back at, obviously we've come a long way. I mean, not everyone has received what they wanted. I think that from our side, we've been open, we've been transparent. I admitted earlier that I was remiss about not being more engaging at the beginning, but this has been a learning process. And I really, truly believe that if you go back, John, and read, especially some of the current letters that were sent in support, I think you'll find that I've been engaging to the immediate neighbors, to neighbors over in Sam Hughes. I went back and presented again to the Sam Hughes Neighborhood Association approximately a month ago, and that was the meeting where no one came out with any big concerns. So I truly believe that this process has been open. I think that we've been more than engaging. I hope that you will vote in favor of it.
we're far from done. As you said at the very beginning, that the mayor and city council really have the last say. And, you know, they still have room to put conditions. We're not done negotiating, I'm sure. I don't think this is, anyone should look at this as that this is the last final draw of what's going to happen on that corner. I think that the potential is phenomenal for all the stakeholders. And I just like the one last thing is that you're dealing with a local team. From the very beginning, there was concern about outsiders coming in. You know, everyone involved on my team is most of us live in the central area and have for many years. So I hope that you will take to heart some of the previous supporters I've had and also read their letters. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Unless anyone else wants to be heard, I'm closing the hearing on case C92012. I want to thank everyone who's participated this evening and at our prior 4 zoning examiner hearings, and I hope everyone on this case has a lovely and safe evening. The next case we have is case SE2106 TEP Patriot Substation. Ms. Gayoso, are you going to present that?
Yes, Mr. Urino, let me adjust my volume to make sure you're hearing me clearly.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is an application by Tucson Electric Power for the construction of a new electric substation. This one is located at the southwest corner of Escalante and Kolb on a 15.8 acre site, currently used by Davis Mountain as part of their boneyard for the storage of aircraft. The proposal includes just the substation equipment, no new buildings, and the proposal includes 12-foot high decorative brick wall enclosing the entire site. Also a 35-foot wide landscape border along the northern portion of the property adjacent to the existing aviation greenway multi-use path on Escalante Road, and also a 126-foot wide drainage border with landscaping along the east side of the site adjacent to the city's planned multi-use path along Kolb Road. The Design Review Board reviewed this project on May 21st this year and recommended approval to the zoning examiner with the following recommendations. For the applicant to pursue coordination with the cities, with the city of Tucson and Davis Mountain for the potential addition of more shade trees on the multi-use path area on both Escalante and Kolb Roads. And also the DRB recommended the applicant to include micro basin water harvesting in shrub areas to encourage the passive water collection. In addition to the basins in tree plantings that they already show in their application. I believe the applicant is here, Mr. Urino, available to answer questions, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Gayoso. Would the applicant like to be heard?
Yes, thank you, John. This is Brian Pugh, land planner with Tucson Electric Power.
Thank you.
I'm at 5239 East 6th Street here in Tucson. If you let me, I'll go ahead and share my screen. We have a presentation to walk through.
Go ahead.
There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
We're here. First off, introductions with the team. Myself was on the call. We also have Chris Ortiz-Apino, who's a land planner with Land Resources Group here at TEP. Doyce Wilson, who's the engineering project manager, who is managing the civil engineering design. We have Jesus Martinez, who is the civil transmission engineer with TEP. We have David Gonzalez, who's the substation engineer. And then we have the manager of distribution and planning engineering, Donovan Sandoval. And we may be joined by a couple of other folks that may do at another meeting, so we'll let them speak to if any questions come up that they can add any answers to. Quick agenda. Basically, we're going to do a brief background of a larger project, and then it's information about the substation itself, and then talk about the setup requirements and the process we've gone through up to this point to the hearing. The location of the project is on the corner of East Escalante and Cole, right there at that intersection. A little bit closer view. This is before the planes have been relocated, but this is basically about 1,200 feet long along Escalante and about 550 feet long along Cole. Now, as you can see, this is the actual a site of the former A-Mark storage facility, which alongside of this, I'm going to go back, there's actually still 2,600 linear feet of A-Mark going to the west on Escalante and over 3,800 feet of the A-Mark going south along Cole. So still very visible. This is just a small portion of what's visible on the site. The larger project that this is tied with is the Irvington to East Loop transmission line project. This is a 14-mile-an-hour proposed 138 kV transmission line that will connect the Irvington campus with the Sun Generation to the planned Patriot substation and then up to the existing East Loop substation. And this substation in this project here will support potential future retirement of the aging lower capacity 46 kV substations, which are radial. This 138 system is part of a loop system, so you can basically, if you had a shutdown on one side, you could power from the other side, whereas in the 46 radial, that's not the case. Also, this project supports Davis-Monthon's Air Force Base Department of Defense Energy Resiliency Directives, which we'll talk a little bit more. The case was brought to the Arizona Corporation Commission for a vote on the Certificate of Environmental Compatibility, and that was approved in April 2020. And now the easements have been obtained and the construction is begin in the summer of 2021, just in a month or so. This week, the property that is actually owned by the city of Tucson was leased to Davis-Monthon. Was basically city of Tucson mayor and council approved the sale of the 15.7 acres to Tucson Electric Power for the future of the 138 kV substation. The zoning this district that it sits in is Suburban Ranch SR, as is the C of that Davis-Monthon A-Mark base is still zoned as. Surrounding to the north is residential R2. Then we have the C1 zoning districts. The city of Tucson has a well site on the corner across the street from Kolb and Escalante, and then south to the southeast is also R2. So through the setup process, this is an allowed use for up to a 138 kV transformer that was presented in the staff report, which sections of the special uses that it conforms to. The purpose and need for the substation is back in 2017, TEP determined that the 46 kV transformer at Davis-Monthon was nearing the end of its life. At the same time, the Department of Defense issued their directive for the military installations to eliminate vulnerabilities, that could result in energy disruptions, and then it fit into the long-term plans that TEP has to retire the 46 and replace them with the 138s. The proposed pieces of the substation is the new substation on the 15.78 acres. And then the main components will be two transformers that will take the high voltage of 138 and then and transform it down to a 13.8 distribution that'll go out to the delivery of the electric service to area customers. And as mentioned, it's basically being built on the site currently used in the A-Mark facility. The benefits with the substation, again, supports the Davis-Monthon efforts to meet the resiliency objectives. It also increases the capacity to help meet the current and future needs for area customers. As Kolb, as everyone knows, that down farther to the south, you have the addition of Amazon. You also have growth going around the rest of the port of Tucson, which this line will travel right near and also serve any of the future customers along this corridor. And also provides reliability to help for TP to restore service if there was an outage due to that loop system I mentioned. And supporting the economic development, and then again, the continued efforts to retire the 46 kVs. This is the letter that was included in the application in Appendix F from the Department of the Air Force supporting the project, mentioning those benefits that I spoke about with the resiliency goals and also the directives that the Department of Defense has mandated. Where we're at in the process, the application process, we had our neighborhood meeting on March 15th, where we had representatives from Ward 4, and we had one of the neighbors that had discussions with us in support of the actual project, but also, mentioning how they really do like to drive by and look at the planes in the AMARG. They have a lot of sense of pride, but there's still a lot of like I said, 2,600 feet along Escalante and over 3,800 feet along Kolb that are still very visible. We had our design review board meeting on May 21st, which Maria mentioned the recommendations that came with that. We had recently just had a Ward 4 briefing just this week. And then as far as the preliminary conditions were in the staff report, we've begun condition 1, which is the development plan has been submitted and is under review. Condition 7 was that the discussion about the potential use of landscape material or a contribution, and our landscape architect has actually had that discussion with the David Marefka from the City of Tucson landscape architect, and he'll add this to the list of sites to consider for other projects and opportunities, mainly the Prop 407 multi-use path that will go down Kolb. So we've begun those conversations, and the city knows that we're willing to continue those. Condition 8 is we've agreed to do the micro basins in the design, and the landscape architect will basically add those. And then condition 9 was the FAA obstruction notification. We've completed that and have another component that need to notify them one more time 10 days before the construction starts, which we'll do. Here's the site here, the preliminary development plan. As mentioned by staff, we have the 130-foot setback off of Kolb that will be also handling all the stormwater detention. And then we have the 35-foot landscape buffer setback off of Escalante that will be adjacent to the existing trail that you can see up there, along with the existing landscape components there. On the south and on the west, we will have setbacks that comply with the zoning district, but we'll also not have any material in there, so we have visual surveillance for the base to see the back and also TEP security to see the back of that wall. The wall itself is 12 foot that has a decorative finish, which we'll look at. The transformers that are located here are basically 355 feet away from the existing residential across the street from Escalante. And I did see a question about the decibels that'll be created by these transformers. We have manufactured data that shows in a testing facility what the decibel levels will be, and basically it's near the actual transformer it'll be 75, but as you get farther away with the doubling distance, that we'll be able to comply with the noise ordinance of the city, which is 62 decibels at the property line from 10 o'clock in the evening to 7 at night. TEP does complete noise studies prior and then post operations to ensure that we're conforming with that. Here are some photo simulations we did for the neighborhood meeting to show existing conditions. View number 1, which is up here in the corner, which is in the northwest corner, you can see the existing conditions of the AMARC storage, and then what we're proposing with the 12-foot wall and then the enhanced landscape with the desert plants. View 2 also is farther down on the corner, closer to Kolb Road and Escalante. And again, you can see the structures that'll be, the drop-ins that'll come off the transmission, and then the lightning masts, which are colored in a brushed galvanized to blend in better with the background sky. Here's the view number 3 and number 4 from that opposite view across Kolb, where you can see the, what was the AMARC. And again, you can see that enhanced landscape area along that larger retention area, the wall itself, and then the equipment that'll be inside the lightning mast, and then the drop structures. And we're also showing where that potential multi-use path for the Prop 407 will go and how it will be incorporated into that landscape design. View 4 is just there on the very end of it, on the southeastern corner, showing the end of the substation there, an enhanced landscape area around the detention basin, and then the lightning mast and the drop-in structure from the south will come in from the transmission line will connect to it, and then the drop-in structure on the right is where the 138 will leave to head down Escalante. Here's a quick detail we showed design detail, we show the DRB to show the banded color scheme that we're proposing. This is the color scheme and also the material, the split block face is what the Davis-Monthan standard also is. So they agreed, we showed this to them and they agreed this conforms to also what they propose. And so it should be a much, obviously fit within any of the work that they do on their exterior too. And also blends in with the similar materials that are used in neighborhoods that have walls around them in along Kolb and Escalante. And that's basically our presentation. If you have any questions.
I don't, but thank you very much, Mr. Pugh. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this matter? Hearing no one, I'm closing the hearing on case SE 2106. Thank you very much for your participation, Mr. Pugh.
Thank you.
Our next case is case SE 2107, City of Tucson Water, Old Nogales Highway. Ms. Gayoso?
Yes, Mr. Urino, this is another request by Tucson Water. This one is to equip a new drill well. This well is near the Old Nogales Highway and Old Vale Connection Road and Pima Mine Road. It's a site that is pretty big. It's 160 acres. However, the proposal is just for a little portion for 0.2 acres of the entire site. On the site, there are other two active Tucson Water wells that will also continue to operate. The proposal includes the 100 square foot new electrical control building and also some essential technology and equipment for the functionality of the well. Also a new communications antenna, 20-foot high. That small portion of the site for the well will be enclosed by a 6-foot high chain link fence. And the applicant is not proposing any additional screening or landscaping. Basically, this proposal is in the middle of Grace land owned by the State Trust land. So the applicant is also available for a presentation and to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gayoso. Ms. Willett, did you want to be heard?
Sure, Mr. Urino, just real quick and for the record, Lexi Willett with the Planning Center, 2 East Congress, Suite 600, Tucson, Arizona, 85701, excuse me. Just wanted to briefly mention, this is another request, as Ms. Gayoso mentioned, for Tucson Water to equip a well that was drilled in 2020. This, as Ms. Gayoso mentioned, the well is located about 12 miles south of TAA and about 2.5 miles east and west from Old Nogales and Wilmot Road. So it's effectively in the middle of nowhere. And so at this site, it's the standard equipment being installed that you're familiar with, so I won't go through that detail. Just wanted to touch base on the interactions we've had with state land, since they are our only neighbor. As part of this process, I reached out to the representative with the state land department, and she had no further questions or concerns with the proposal. So with that, if you have any questions for me, or I've got Fernando Molina on the line from Tucson Water as well. So if you have any questions, we're happy to take those.
Thank you, Ms. Willett. I don't have any right now. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard? Hearing no one, I'm closing the hearing on case SE 21007, City of Tucson Water, Old Nogales Highway. Want to thank everyone for participating and have a great evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.